It's the CSS Life. I'm Megan Jameson. Twice each semester, we choose a theme and bring you stories from the CSS community based on that theme. This quarter, the upcoming election. Act 1, we look at the political climate of the Benedictine sisters. Act 2, ask a professor. Act 3, take a look at the election through the eyes of 2 foreign exchange students. A young and intelligent woman once said that once her faith became the most important aspect of her life, it was time that she came knocking on the large wooden doors of the St. Scholastica monastery. She left behind her family, friends, square dancing, clinical research with nurses, and her chance to receive her doctorate to better serve God and the community. Those echoing knocks occurred on February 28, 1998, and will forever resonate in the long hallways of the monastery and Tower Hall. A lot has changed since 1998, but this sister has maintained to stay true to her morals. She deeply believes in the Benedictine values and wishes that more people would practice them within society. For those of you who don't know the 5 Benedictine values CSS practices, they are the love of learning, stewardship, respect, hospitality, and the sense of community. Those values can make even the slightest improvement in bettering one community every day that will eventually interact with thousands of other communities later on in life. Here are her thoughts about this year's presidential election.
My full name is Sister Edith Bogue. I'm the Associate Professor of Sociology. I'm the only full-time sociologist on the faculty, and I also serve on a bunch of committees.
When asked if Sister Edith has voted before, she makes it known that voting is important to her because she has never once missed an election since she has been able to legally vote. Which then leads us to ask her, why is it so important to you to vote?
Well, voting is one of the ways that we have of expressing our opinion, and certainly I feel if we don't vote, then we don't have so much ground to stand on to complain about when we get whatever we get. I cast my first vote shortly after the Vietnam War, and at that time people 18 to 21 were not allowed to vote, and so people that I was going to college with were going off to war and some of them not coming back, and they hadn't even had a chance to vote on whether or not that war should be happening.
During our interview with Sister Edith, we were shocked to hear that she does not typically vote for the candidate that is most likely to win. Her past voting habits have revealed a trend that perhaps young voters should consider when standing in front of his or her ballot on Election Day.
I got to vote for the first black mayor of the city of Chicago, Harold Washington, and so there were some votes I got to cast that were pretty important in terms of changing history. I've also sometimes voted for third and fourth party candidates because in some situations they need to get 5% of the vote just to be able to keep their party on the ballot. And I really feel like the more voices that are heard, the better.
When asked what does voting look like for a Benedictine sister, she replies,
the sisters don't talk much about votes. We definitely talk about the election. We don't vote as a block. There's nobody's electioneering. We don't sit down at the dinner table and have our arm twisted, vote this way or vote that way. I don't think Bishop Serbo would be unhappy with my vote. And so where it used to be just me getting in a car and going to vote, it now might be me and 3 or 4 other people getting in a car and going down to vote. So there's sort of a collective feel that way. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. What I really look for in a candidate in general would be concern for the well-being of all. So I'm allergic to that question they ask every presidential season. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Which means that I should just be voting for my own selfish interest rather than the common good. So I'm kind of allergic to that question.
We would like to pause for a moment and point out the way Sister Edith responds to the question that people ask the presidential candidate every year. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? She clearly is agitated by that question because she repeatedly uses the word allergic to the question to describe her feelings. We found it interesting because it's not very common for a person to be so distrait about a question that every presidential election raises.
The things that make the headlines in the newspaper are not the views of the Catholic Church. Until this year, I've always been really, really, really up to date on who said what and all of that. And I'm definitely, as a sociologist, I follow a lot of political issues. I follow the news quite regularly. But I am so disgusted that I read the debates after they're happening, but I just can't stand to watch them. This is the first time I've ever been this disengaged, and I'm just sick of these guys.
So how does your view of the Benedictine values translate to a good electoral candidate?
I guess I'd have to say Barack Obama used to be a college professor, so there'd have to be some love of learning in there somewhere, and he's definitely well-read. And I guess I'd have to say Romney is really concerned about our economic future, especially your economic future, and his concern with the debt. I share that concern, so I'd probably have to give him some stewardship points there, but nobody's getting high points on the Benedictine values, unfortunately.
Our CSS sisters make a huge influence on how the faculty and student population interact with society. Without the sisters, the 5 Benedictine values would not be enforced as much as they are today. When it comes to Election Day, it is important for the young and even the experienced voters to take into consideration the simplest question. In your opinion, which candidate will uphold and live by the 5 Benedictine values the best?